It's time for Talk Law Radio with Todd Marquardt. Todd Marquardt, attorney at law in Texas. If you're a millionaire or a thousandaire, Talk Law Radio is now on the air. Call in with your business law question, your elder law question, veteran aid, Medicaid, build a business to get paid. 210-308-8867. Or ask a question online at marquardtlawfirm.com. That's MARQUARDT lawfirm.com. And now it's Talk Law Radio with Todd Marquardt.
Welcome to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt on the radio, on podcasts everywhere, on Facebook Live and on YouTube. Also, go to talklawradio.com if you want to be a guest on the show or if you want to sponsor the show. Today we're going to be talking about Fiesta and criminal defense. But before we do that, I want to give you a disclaimer because we're going to be talking about the law, and I don't want people to think that we're giving them legal advice. In order to get legal advice, you have to hire an attorney and sign an attorney-client engagement agreement. But the State Bar does want us to talk about the law and inform the public about the law. But because legal advice must be tailored to the specific circumstances of each case, and because laws are ever-changing, and legal advice must be tailored to the specific circumstances, material discussed in this program is meant for general informational purposes only and is not to be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. Marquardt Law Firm sponsors the show. Before we get started talking about the law, let's begin with prayer. Dear God, thank you for this day and for all the gifts and blessings that you give to us. Please forgive us for our mistakes, for our sins, for doing the wrong thing, for failing to follow your will. Please help Stephen Barrera, Scott Simpson, and me give good information to the listeners about how to stay out of trouble during Fiesta in 2025 today. Help us to use the gifts and talents that you give us for the good of your people, for our own good, and for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Now it's time to discover your legal issue blind spots by listening to me talk about the law on the radio. Welcome to the show, Scott Simpson, Stephen Barrera. Scott, since you're over there on my right, tell us about your background and experience.
I'll be happy to. I'm originally from New Jersey, but I've lived here since 1984. I went to law school later in life. I was 32 years old when I went to law school. Went to law school specifically to be a prosecutor. Was a prosecutor under Steve Hilbig and Susan Reed, then went out into private practice. Was in private practice for a while, and then when Nico LaHood became DA, he asked me to come back and head up his child victim unit, so I did that, and then I retired when he lost. Did some prosecuting in Medina County, and then I recently started with Brick Criminal Defense, and I'm enjoying the heck out of it, and it started with them March 1st.
Oh, great. Okay, Stephen, tell us about you.
So I grew up in a very small town, Lavernia, Texas, and my father was an attorney, so that gave me a little bit of perspective and understanding what I was getting into when I decided to go into the law.
Really? My kids don't want to be an attorney.
My father tried to talk me out of it. But I saw what he did, and I saw the interactions that he had with his clients and with other attorneys at the courthouse, and it just seemed like something that would suit my personality. So I got into the practice, and I started with a small town practice. And then at some point, good friend of mine, Chris Cavazos, was leaving his position as a prosecutor, and we decided to start this firm, Brick Criminal Defense. And recently we've been lucky in that we've been able to bring Scott aboard, which is a blessing for us because we've always admired Scott. He has a great reputation, and he kind of carries himself in his practice in accordance with our philosophy, which is you're looking out for the person that you're representing, and you're trying to get them through this complex situation and put them in a better position than maybe they were when they came to you. Yeah. So we've been fortunate in that regard to have them with us.
Scott, why don't you say more about your experience? Because before the show started, we were talking about murder, and I had no idea that you had so much experience with that.
Well, so I've had hundreds of trials. A lot of my trials have been cases where they're child victim cases where something's happened between a stepdad or an uncle. I've done a lot of. I used to teach other prosecutors around the state about how to handle baby deaths. We have a high teen pregnancy rate here in San Antonio. When you have a high teen pregnancy rate, that leads to more baby deaths, and those are very hard cases to prosecute.
That's awful.
These are different. I used to say that I had a full head of hair before I started doing that work.
Right.
But you can't. I mean, I know some people say, well, that's depressing, but it's not depressing because you can sit there and try to bring some sense of closure and peace to someone. It's
justice too.
It's never. So say somebody was molested by their father. If you send them off to prison, it's not a happy situation for the child or myself either. It's not something to celebrate because they still cared for that person too.
Yeah.
So these are not situations where you look and you're gleeful that you sent someone off to prison. It had to be done, and it's the right thing to do. But we're all people here. One of the things as a defense attorney, sometimes I get clients who come to me and they feel like that they'll never amount to anything. Like I'm just terrible, and I always tell them about the person who did the most to spread Christianity across the world was Paul, but he was killing Christians before his conversion.
That's true.
So everybody's redeemable. And so when people say to us, well, how can you represent people who are guilty? Because they're entitled to be treated fairly too.
I'm so glad you said that. That's a great insight. Stephen, tell us about Brick Defense. It's more than murder, right? There's probably other crimes that are more likely to be defended than those.
Absolutely. So we have 6 attorneys at Brick Criminal Defense. All we practice is criminal defense, okay? So we don't handle any other type of case. As my partner Chris likes to say, if somebody came to us with a multi-million-dollar personal injury case, we would have to refer it out because that's not what we do. We focus on criminal defense, and that's what we're good at. We do certainly handle cases like murder, but a lot of the cases that we come across are just people who are well-intended and just happen to find themselves on the wrong side of the law, right? Maybe they went out to celebrate an event and they had a little too much to drink. Maybe, they got into an argument with somebody that turned physical. But a lot of these people, they're not criminals as we think of them. They're just people who made a mistake or had a bad day. And our goal is to put them back into the position that maybe they were in prior to this incident in their lives.
Where does the case begin? When somebody calls, is it they're calling from jail, or you get a referral from a bail bondsman? How do you get started when somebody first gets into trouble?
All different types of ways. But yet we get sometimes calls from the jail. A lot of times it'll be family members that the firm has represented before. They have another family member in trouble. And so there's some people a lot of our cases are DWIs. And so people get in trouble and they want to hire somebody, and they're making calls around to a few different people, and they're trying to decide.
Will the police allow somebody to call you guys like during the stop?
No.
I've only had that happen once, and it's because the guy was going to be taken into custody because they were saying he had not taken care of a ticket, and there was a warrant, and he had. And he said, can you call my lawyer? And the officer actually called me and said, hey, I need you to be honest with me. Is this resolved? And I told him it was, and he let the guy go. In my 20 years of practice, that's the only time that's ever happened.
What jurisdiction was that?
I was in Wilson County.
Okay.
It was a Floresville PD officer, so I guess maybe small town.
Right.
So they're maybe a little more trusting out in that area.
Tell us a little bit more about Brick Criminal Defense. What are some of your guiding principles and mission?
Yeah, so like I said, my father was an attorney, and one of the things that he showed me was that, when we get this law license, it's actually a powerful tool that we can use to help people, right? And so when people come into our office, they're dealing with the possibly the worst thing that's ever happened in their life. They're being accused of a crime that may interfere with their ability to maintain employment, to provide for their family. They're possibly looking at incarceration. And so what we do is do everything we can to get them through that process and allow them to get back to the life that they had prior to that. So, and it's something that we take very seriously.
Awesome. Well, we got to take a break. Stay tuned because I'm going to be asking about assault and DWI and drug possession. Stay tuned.
Don't wait until it's too late. Spring is here and it's the perfect time to review and update your last will or living trust. Have you recently moved, have changes in your health, or had a change in your family? If so, your current documents may be outdated and ineffective. Don't risk your wishes not being protected. At Marquardt Law Firm, our experienced attorneys can help you update your documents and ensure your future is secure. Call today at 210-530-4278. That's 210-530-4278 or visit marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt on the radio, on Facebook Live, on YouTube, and on talklawradio.com. If you're watching live on Facebook right now, you can post a question in the comments area, and I should be able to see it during the show. If you have questions about how to hire a criminal defense attorney, how to stay out of trouble, how to stay safe during Fiesta. The reason I wanted to have you guys on the show is because it's Fiesta, and with Fiesta, there's a lot of drinking of alcohol, and people's judgment gets impaired, and they get in trouble. And so we want to let people know ahead of time, before they go downtown, what are some things that they should do to stay out of trouble. What do you see are some of the most troubling things that people get in trouble for?
Well, obviously during Fiesta, everybody's out to have a good time, right? And sometimes along with that comes imbibing in alcohol, okay? We're fortunate nowadays in that we have apps like Uber and Lyft. And so if you know that you're going to be out and you're going to be having a good time and you're going to be drinking, there's nothing wrong with that. But you don't want to put yourself and others in a dangerous situation by getting behind the wheel of a vehicle when you're intoxicated. Now, here's the thing. People aren't very good judges of whether or not they are intoxicated, right? You can get somebody who says, hey, I feel fine, I always drink this much, but that's not how we define intoxication under the law. It's the loss of physical or mental faculties due to the ingestion of some substance, usually alcohol, right? So people shouldn't use themselves as the barometer of, hey, I'm intoxicated. Mm-hmm. If you're drinking at all, you should, try to utilize Lyft or Uber or have somebody drive you around. That way you can avoid that situation with the DWI. Also,
there's not going to be much parking.
Right.
And they're going to close some of the streets.
Yeah, that's not to mention the fact that it's just more convenient. Now, you do have to be careful of the surge prices during Fiesta because the prices do surge up, but it's way less expensive than paying an attorney to cover your DWI.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I have a question about that. San Antonio Police Chief William McManus said last year San Antonio Police Department arrested 139 people for DWI during Fiesta. What are the consequences for DWI? Why should people get a designated driver?
Well, so it's going to cost a lot of money. Okay, first of all, you're going to get your license suspended. It depends on whether you agree to blow or not blow, but either way, you're going to get your license suspended at some point, which means you're going to have to get an occupational driver's license, which costs money. Now the legislature has passed these super fines for DWIs, so you have to pay $2,000 to $3,000 in super fines, not to mention the court costs and the fine you have to pay if you get probation. Not to mention your attorney's fees. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, I saw a billboard that said something like a DWI costs you something like $10,000.
I've seen that, yeah.
And that's probably pretty. It's probably not less.
Okay.
So spend $70 for an Uber,
right?
Or spend $10,000 for the consequences of picking up a DWI. Not to mention what if you're in that horrible situation where you're driving intoxicated and you kill somebody? Now your life's never going to be the same.
Right.
Okay. Even if you go the wrong way because you're confused, and you can go the wrong way downtown in San Antonio.
Yeah.
And you hit somebody on the head on and you don't kill them, but you injure them. Your life's never going to be the same. Well, why take those risks?
Stephen, there used to be an old saying, don't blow, don't dance, meaning don't consent to a field sobriety test. What are some myths about drinking, driving, and somehow avoiding the DWI conviction?
Well, so it used to be the case that we didn't have these blood draws that they do nowadays. And so a lot of times if you refuse to blow into that intoxilizer, the only thing that they could use to try to prove that you were intoxicated was either the officer's testimony about how you appeared during the time of the stop, or, after the advent of the dash cam, maybe the video from the dash cam, right? Mm-hmm. But nowadays, here in Bexar County, they can get that blood draw warrant very easily and draw your blood, right? And so we always used to give the advice, hey, don't blow, don't cooperate. Nowadays, you really don't have that choice, okay? Mm-hmm. So that I would say that is a myth. The whole idea is, well, if you don't blow, they can't really prosecute you. No, they will, and they'll get that blood draw warrant, and they'll get that report back from the lab, and you'll be prosecuted.
And it's harder as a defense attorney to go up against a blood result because everybody believes in the blood results versus a lot of people are skeptical of the intoxilizer, those breath blows.
Right.
So I think if I'm sitting there in trial, I'd rather be going up against a blow than a blood draw.
Okay, because of the science behind it.
Exactly right.
All right. Well, there's some other things that could happen at Fiesta when you're down having a good time with your friends, and that could be drug possession. So I have heard that some people nowadays smoke a vape device with marijuana oil. Is that legal? What are the consequences of getting caught with that?
Well, so what people don't realize, so if you have marijuana on you, it's a misdemeanor. Those vape pens with THC oil, that's a felony. Okay, and so I'm not saying I agree with how the legislature characterizes that. Mm-hmm. It's just, but people don't realize. First of all, most people don't know what the heck is in that vape pen. Right, and so they don't realize there's THC oil in there. And those who do, they think it's legal because there's confusion out there in the community about CBD oil versus THC,
right.
And so they have no idea that by carrying that vape pen and driving around and getting pulled over, say you get pulled over for or say you're walking around and acting the fool down at NIOSA,
yeah,
and they stop you for public intoxication, and now you got a vape pen. Public intoxication is a ticket. It's up to a $500 fine. That's it. But now I have a vape pen in my pocket with THC. Now I'm looking at a state jail felony or a third-degree felony, 2 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm. And a felony is life-changing.
Yes.
A felony can affect your ability to maintain your occupation, to get promotions at work, to maintain a professional license of some sort. So a lot of people, they're buying these vape pens at the vape shop, and they don't know that they're setting themselves up for a life-changing event if they get caught with that vape pen.
Yeah. Well, that's why we talk about it here, to let the people know that this is a hidden legal issue blind spot. Okay, Stephen, I've noticed from watching the Cops TV show that people don't like to be searched by police. When is a police officer justified in searching someone's pockets, purse, or backpack?
Sure. So when an officer has an encounter with you, they have to have some indication that maybe there's something wrong. You're committing some kind of an offense, whatever the case may be. During this encounter that they have with you, they have a right to pat you down for their own safety, to see whether you have a gun, to see whether you have some kind of weapon. During that pat down, it's possible that they find contraband. Now, if they have reason to believe and they have some information that a crime may be committed, at that point they can do a more thorough search, kind of a probable cause search, where they can go through your possessions and go through your items. And that's where a lot of people end up getting in trouble, right? Like Scott mentioned, you're walking around downtown, you're stumbling, so they start talking to you, maybe investigating that public intoxication, but you have some contraband in your pocket. You have the vape pen, you have the little baggie of cocaine, whatever the case may be. Well, now
not me,
not you. That's hypothetical. But now by committing that Class C misdemeanor ticket offense, you've allowed that officer to perform a search that's going to get you in trouble for a much more serious offense.
Okay, and how about those people that, because of their intoxication, get upset that they're being bothered by the police? Are there situations where something can go from bad to worse?
Yeah, and so if you feel like the search isn't justified, you still have to comply with the police then. We'll be able to get, if the search isn't justified, we'll be able to deal with that in court. But the police officer isn't going to take your opinion as to whether the search is justified or not, and then it's going to escalate to a resisting. They're going to do what they're going to do. If it's unlawful, we'll take care of it. Call us up and we'll deal with it, okay? But don't sit there and think that you're going to keep that police officer from doing what he thinks he's justified in doing. That's not going to work out well for you. And if it rises to the level that it goes from resisting to assault on a public servant, now another third-degree felony, looking at 2 to 10.
And so where does it cross the line to assault? Are you just not supposed to touch the officer, or? So an assault has to be
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
with using bodily causes bodily injury. So if I'm just pulling away from the officer or I push the officer, that's a resisting. Don't do that. I'm responding to your question. But once if he's trying to control me and I kick at him or swing at him and connect, that's going to be an assault on a peace officer.
And even a threat, if you're making some kind of threat against that officer, like, hey, if I ever see you out in the street, or I'm going to find you, or that's a felony.
That's a second degree. That's retaliation.
Really?
Yeah, and so that makes it worse, and we do get those cases. Now, some officers use their discretion. This happens frequently when somebody's getting taken downtown and they're drunk and they're saying all kinds of crazy stuff in the back of the vehicle, like I'm going to get you when I get out. Some officers just let it go. Other officers will take their opportunity to file a second-degree retaliation charge on that person.
Wow.
That's serious stuff.
Okay, well, I'm not sure who to direct this question to, Scott Simpson or Stephen Barrera, but some time ago there was a big push to decriminalize small amounts of marijuana. What is the current law about possession of marijuana? What are the consequences of having it?
Well, Scott's prosecuted these cases most recently, so
Sure.
he's probably best to address this.
Well, so the law in Texas is it's all illegal, okay? And there was a time where there was some movement afoot between the far left and the far right combined together to try to legalize it, and we thought that maybe there was going to be some movement. But right now in the legislative session, I'm being told that they're moving the opposite direction. They're making hemp illegal to eliminate the question about whether this is really THC or not. So for the community out there, marijuana is just illegal in the state of Texas.
Marijuana's bad, okay?
Any type of marijuana, if you're thinking that, I don't know how some of these CBD shops are operating, and I think the legislature is trying to move to make it illegal for them too. But we'll see. The session is in right now. But marijuana is just not legal in the state of Texas, and it's going to be that way for the foreseeable future.
And you've had some municipalities that have decriminalized it or attempted to do that, right? Like Austin, San Marcos. But I just saw on the news where even that is no longer going to be allowed. You're not going to be allowed to have these local municipalities who say, hey, we're just not going to enforce this law.
Yeah.
If we catch somebody with a minor amount, we're not going to prosecute them. They're not allowed to do that anymore.
Right, because the governor wanted to pass a law that said a
He can remove the
municipality
DA.
can't go against the state law.
That's it, right. You had some prosecutors that were saying, hey, I recognize this is a law, but I'm not going to prosecute it. Well, the governor said, no, you're not allowed to do that. So don't assume that just because you're in an area where like in Austin or a San Marcos or what have you, that it's okay to carry a minor amount of marijuana. It's not. You're going to be prosecuted, and it's going to be a problem.
Okay, well, we're going to have to take another break. I've been talking with Scott Simpson and Stephen Barrera, both of Brick Criminal Defense here in San Antonio and surrounding areas. And we're talking about how to stay out of trouble in Fiesta, San Antonio 2025. When we come back, we'll talk about other problems that people run into when they're downtown drinking and having a good time, when they accidentally cross over from doing something fun into doing something wrong and getting in trouble with the police. Stay tuned. Don't miss it. Be right back. Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt, on the radio, on Facebook, on YouTube, on podcasts everywhere, and on talklawradio.com. We're talking to Scott Simpson and Stephen Barrera, both attorneys with Brick Criminal Defense. That's BRCK Criminal Defense. If you're in trouble, reach out to them. But this is our third segment. It's the Sinners and Saints segment. So you might remember the Meredith Brooks song. You remember what year that was?
Sometime in the 90s,
yeah,
right? I mean, I'm a Generation X, grunge kid, so that was sometime in the 90s.
1997.
97, there you go.
I like this song because, like I was telling you before the show, I like to talk about the law and the gospel. So I appreciate you bringing up Paul. He was Saul, and then he was redeemed as Paul. And so for this segment, I like to talk about a sinner in the news or a saint in the news. But the question I wanted to ask before we get back to how to stay out of trouble is, have you ever heard of somebody who got arrested, pled no contest, or was convicted and changed their habits and circumstances where you could clearly see that they changed from sinner to saint?
All the time. I mean, so we have our share of people who have committed serious crimes but have never had criminal history before, but all of a sudden they went down the path of, a lot of time meth is a terrible all drugs are bad, but meth really, the people we know who have gotten into meth, just their life has spiraled out of control and it's led to them doing terrible things, and then once they realize you cross a Rubicon to some extent, and I can't do this with my life anymore. And we've been able to help them so that they've turned their lives around. And we see it constantly, almost on a weekly basis.
That must be really satisfying.
It is. I had a young man that I represented years ago who was in the grips of drug addiction. And as we were going through his case, he was going to rehab, and he started, residing in a sober living house. And you see that from time to time. While a case is pending, somebody's going to do whatever they can to help with their case, right? And so, and I don't view it cynically or anyway. I just view it for what it is. But then the case was over, and he friend requested me on Facebook. And, and ordinarily I don't accept a friend request from a client, but there was something about him and his character where I thought, I would like to kind of see where his life goes. And since that time, it must be 6-7 years now, he's continued that. He's continued helping out at sober living centers. He's continued helping other people who are dealing with addiction issues. And so he took that incident in his life and he used that in order to improve other people's lives. And it's been very heartwarming and encouraging to see. To see somebody who was in the middle of that and used it as a positive thing.
Great. So you were a prosecutor for a long time.
I've got about 21 years total as prosecutor. Yeah.
That's a long time. And you wanted to talk about the difference between prosecutorial discretion and like flat out refusing to follow the law.
Right. So I want to make it clear, I've never agreed when an elected DA says, I'm not going to enforce this law. Okay. There's times as a prosecutor where we look at cases. There's cases I've dismissed that had very small amounts of drugs because it was under 0.02. I mean, so a gram of a drug is like a sweet and low packet. So if you're talking 0.25 of a gram, so those minimal amount ones I've dismissed. I've seen they have no criminal history. I've just dismissed them. But I'm not sitting there and saying I'm dismissing every single low-level drug case.
It's sort of like a business decision.
Correct. Right? You're looking. People should get credit for having no criminal history. Now you get into trouble if it's like all friends of the elected get that credit and nobody else does. You have to be consistent on how you do it. But so you use your discretion to decide that these cases are worthy of consideration and giving somebody a break. But at the same time, if you sit there and stand up and say, I'm never going to enforce this law. Well, when you get elected, and even as an assistant district attorney, when I get sworn in to become an assistant district attorney, I have to raise my hand and say, I promise to prosecute the laws of the state and defend the laws of the state. And so how can you do that and say, I'm not going to enforce these laws? And I'm as a prosecutor, I was known as being fairly lenient and easy to work with. So I'm not one of those prosecutors who wants everybody to go away. But I'm saying I don't see how you can say I'm not going to enforce this law.
Good point. Well, let's move on to staying out of trouble during Fiesta San Antonio 2025. One time at Oyster Bake, I accidentally bumped into a very large gentleman who was deeply offended, and so I was like scared to death, and thank goodness my brother or somebody was there to say, we're moving him along, don't worry about him. But if he had punched me in the face, would he have been justified? Say that was self-defense, he hit me first?
No. So here's the way it works. So the first bit of advice is when you're attending these Fiesta events, kind of know what you're getting into, right? Fiesta gets crowded. The lines are long. Everybody's kind of bumping to get past each other to go to the bathroom or what have you. You can't use those moments of incidental contact as justification for going off and punching somebody, right?
Okay.
We do have our self-defense laws here in the state of Texas that says that if somebody is using force against you, they're intentionally using force, right? They're pushing you, they're punching you, they're trying to cause you harm. You can use force to defend yourself, but in the situation you described, that's incidental.
Right.
So you can't use that just to go off.
And don't be easily offended, right?
Well, and so that's the other thing. That a big thing that comes up, when people come in and they have these assault cases, is they'll say, well, I was at this bar or I was at this place, and there was this guy that just started yelling at me and calling me names and using bad language against me, and so I went out and punched him. And, the view that people should have is kind of that old adage that we were taught when we were kids, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me, right? Verbal provocation, somebody calling you a bad name, somebody making fun of you, somebody catcalling your date is not enough for you to just go out and start assaulting them or hurting them, right? So the bad language and stuff, it's not going to hurt as much as being arrested. Right? I mean, you strike somebody, you're going to get arrested in front of your date, in front of your family, in front of your loved ones. You're going to go to jail. That's going to hurt you. You're going to have to post bail and come up with money for that. That's going to hurt you. All of those things are going to hurt much more than, somebody yelling at you or calling you a bad word at a public event.
Yeah.
And so in addition, now you don't have to wait till somebody punches you in the face to defend yourself, though. So if it goes from the level of you're a jerk to I'm going to hit you, you don't have to wait for them to hit you to defend yourself. The thing that you have to remember is there's two factors. Is what you did reasonable and immediately necessary? That's and it's not going to be you who decides whether it was reasonable or immediately necessary. It's going to be a jury of your peers. So you may think I'm completely justified, and we've tried a lot of self-defense cases, but in the end, you're probably going to have to go to trial on that because the legal system is going to say, well, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Let's let a jury decide.
And it's expensive to go through a trial.
It is.
Hire an attorney, a good attorney. and then the aggravation, the stress of all of that too.
Because we can't guarantee anybody the results of a jury trial. We could try the same case 5 different times in front of 5 different juries and get 5 different results.
And the thing that a lot of people don't understand is that self-defense is a defense, meaning you still get prosecuted. And it is incumbent on you and your attorney to kind of show that defense. And so the state doesn't necessarily have to dismiss it just because you're saying, well, it was self-defense. I believe I acted in self-defense. Like, Scott said, that's for a jury to decide.
Yeah.
And so now you've placed your fate in the hands of a jury, and you don't know who your jury is going to be.
Best to just avoid that situation, even if you do have to swallow some pride.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's why pride's one of the 7 deadlies.
One more question. There's going to be a lot of good-looking females attending Fiesta. If someone touches them without their consent, what information do they need to have to tell police?
You need to make the police report, but you're going to have to be able to, so if they touch you and you go and grab an officer and they've disappeared in the crowd, they're going to have to be identified there at the scene. So you got to let the officer know right away. It used to be that touching someone like that was just a Class C assault, but they changed the law to make an indecent assault type of thing when you're touching someone like that they can do it as a Class A misdemeanor, which is punishable by up to a year in jail. But we still got to prove the case when we're a prosecutor. So we have to be able to identify that person and say it's the same person.
Yeah, so if you're having fun and you're having some drinks and you think that someone from the opposite sex is interested in you, you should be sure about that before you take it any further.
Yeah, I would think like touching someone who you just met at NIOSA is probably not ever a good idea.
Right.
Yeah. Stay out of trouble. This is the hidden legal issue blind spot of the day. Stay out of trouble at Fiesta in San Antonio. Talking with Scott Simpson and Stephen Barrera of BRCK Criminal Defense. That's BRCK Criminal Defense. Look them up online. Program their phone number into your phone and have them on speed dial just in case. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Don't wait until it's too late. Spring is here and it's the perfect time to review and update your last will or living trust. Have you recently moved, have changes in your health, or had a change in your family? If so, your current documents may be outdated and ineffective. Don't risk your wishes not being protected. At Marquardt Law Firm, our experienced attorneys can help you update your documents and ensure your future is secure. Call today at 210-530-4278. That's 210-530-4278 or visit marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt, talking with Stephen Barrera, Scott Simpson with BRCK Criminal Defense. That's BRCK Criminal Defense. And we've been discussing how to stay out of trouble during Fiesta in San Antonio. This is our 4th segment. This is our legacy segment.
And now, it's time for the Talk Law Radio Legacy Spotlight. What's your legacy? Sponsored by Marquardt Law Firm.
Yeah, so Marquardt Law Firm sponsors the show, and we focus on business and estate law, including last wills, living trusts, and tax-protected inheritance plans. It's all about legacy. And the Bible talks about legacy. In the book of Genesis, chapter 48, verse 15, shows an example of Jacob's legacy for Joseph. Jacob says, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys," and here's the important part, "in them let my name be carried on." And so I never really highlighted that before, let my name be carried on. But that's our legacy. A friend of mine I had on the show, he said our legacy is the collection of the decisions that we make. And so I want to ask you guys about your legacy. Scott, since you're new to the show, you can go first.
Well, so I just had this conversation the other day with. There's a lot as a senior prosecutor of the DA's office. I had the opportunity to mentor a lot of prosecutors, and we were talking in the hallway about if you're a prosecutor, the Code of Criminal Procedure says your duty is to see that justice is done, which is unusual because a lot of states simply say seek justice, but justice doesn't mean just helping out the victim. It means being fair to the defendant too. Mm-hmm. But we were talking about there's some prosecutors who take satisfaction in always getting the maximum punishment instead of considering them as human beings. And what my friend told me, he said, the people who came up under you, they're more fair. That people who are mentored by other
awesome.
people, I was very happy to hear that. I felt like I can die in peace. People have said that
that's a great legacy.
Taught me how to be fair, and so that made me very happy.
Yeah. Stephen, what about you? I don't remember what you said last time when we were talking about Halloween.
Sure. So, hopefully a big part of my legacy, are these lessons that I learned from my father. Like I said, my father was an attorney, and he always viewed his clients as real people. Mm-hmm. And I know that, sounds obvious, but you know how this is. We are in the same industry. There are certainly attorneys out there who are just happy to take someone's money and may not really care about the actual person that they're doing the work for, right? I mean, so my father was very big on that, on seeing his clients as people with real problems, and he wanted to use his law license to help them. And so I hope my legacy is that there are people out there who say, I came to Steve with this issue. I was being accused of a terrible crime, and he saw me as a person. Like he understood that I wasn't defined by maybe this one thing, or I wasn't defined by this accusation against me, and he treated me with respect. Because, I mean, like Scott says, it's all about, seeing the people that go through not just the criminal justice system, but just the law in general, like you and your partner Daniel do, as real people who have real problems, and we need to give them that respect and that dignity.
Yeah, and it's confusing, for lay people to begin with.
Absolutely.
So they need a guide, whether they did it or not.
And that's, part of our title, in addition to being an attorney, is being a counselor. Mm-hmm. And our job is to give people information so that they can make decisions that are best for them and their family.
Right.
And I officed with his father when I first came out of the DA's office. I'm older. I'm 64. And everybody loved his dad. And he carries on the tradition of being kind and pleasant to everybody that his dad had to.
That's awesome. Yeah. Tell us what you brought with you.
Okay, so my grandfather, this is a Liberty Head silver dollar here, and my grandfather carried it in his pocket for good luck his whole life, and when he died, he gave it to my dad, who carried it in his pocket his whole life, and so it's worn so much that you can't see the Liberty Head on it, just for the camera, and so I don't carry it in my pocket like they did. I just keep it on my bookshelf. Mm-hmm. But this is something that I will give to my son when I pass. And my dad always considered it extremely lucky. And one time we were on a canoe trip in New Jersey, and the canoe tipped over and it fell into the river.
Oh, wow!
But it was shallow river, and we kept diving until he finally found it underneath of a root and pulled it back up.
Wow!
Yeah. Wow! Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that I've kept anything that long. That's several generations. That's a great family heirloom there. Before we go back to the problems and staying safe, I want to say something about legacy, because when you leave somebody an inheritance, you leave them whatever assets you have left, whether that be money in the bank or a house or a family farm or ranch. I like to ask my clients, well, what do you hope they will achieve by receiving that? And some people say they don't care. Some people have objectives, like Jacob had for his sons, that they go out and continue doing good in the world. If you have a child or a beneficiary that's addicted to drugs or alcohol or gambling or anything like that, or if they're just bad with money, or if they can't hold down a job, there's a way to leave an inheritance to them so that it can be managed by somebody else, a trustee, to make sure that they don't do more harm than good with the money that you've lent them. And so we use a trust for that, and I just wanted the audience to know that that's possible.
It's important too. And one thing about one of the mistakes I think we make as family is we tell, and lawyers do it too. So we got a guy who's got a drug case, and of course they're, as part of pretrial, they're getting urinals, they're having to pee in a cup. Okay, we always tell them you can't use drugs anymore. If you do, that's the end. Okay, if it was easy to stop using drugs and stop drinking, we wouldn't have these problems.
Right.
It's not easy. I always like to tell them you really can't do this, but if you do fall off the wagon, start again the next day. Because we tell them all the time as attorneys and family, you can't ever do this again. If you do it, you ruin your life. When they do fall, they have a bad day and they do it once, they give up and they say, oh, I'm just worthless, I can't do it. Instead of, because that's what we've ingrained in them. We got to tell them, it's going to be hard, and you may fall down one day. You get back up and start again the next day.
Yeah, I love that. And plus your comment in the first or second segment when you said that everybody's redeemable. That's
Absolutely.
great. Okay, well, let's go back to Fiesta. There's going to be lots of events coming up. What are some of your favorite events?
So, I went to law school at St. Mary's University. So I'm partial to the oyster bake.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, when I was a student at St. Mary's University, I hated the oyster bake because the oyster bake takes place during finals. So I would be there studying for my finals. And they would start shutting down the campus. And then after the oyster bake, the campus smelled horrible. It just smelled like rotted oysters and spilled beer and what have you.
See, he was the nerd who was studying while they were all partying.
Yeah, right.
There you go. So, but I've always been partial to the oyster bake. And my father was a musician in addition to being an attorney. And so oyster bake's always been cool for me because he played some of the stages at oyster bake with his band. And so that's always been near and dear to my heart.
That's fun. How about you,
I go to Niosa every single year. I get there when the gates open, and I make sure to get out early. When we talk about not getting in trouble, the later the night is, the more trouble is going to find you. So get in early, have your fun, and get out before it gets crazy.
Especially if you bring your kids.
Exactly.
I suggest leaving before dark because that's like when the switch happens, when all the heavy drinkers start showing up.
Right.
Well, and for Scott, that's probably when a lot of people that he prosecuted start coming out.
I've had people come up to me and say, hey, you were my prosecutor, and they say, but you treated me fairly, thank you. So I've never had anybody give me grief. So
that's the legacy. There you go.
Yeah. But, so please don't get sloppy drunk out there because you get in trouble when you're not aware of your surroundings. And nobody, and if you're always the guy of your friend group that they have to take care of because you're sloppy drunk, all of a sudden your friends aren't going to be going out with you anymore.
Yeah. And to go along with that, I would say if you're walking around, don't be looking at your phone because you might bump into somebody, you might cause somebody to spill their drink, or you might be the subject of a criminal attack.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's staring at your phone, not being aware of your surroundings, and next thing you know, you're being pickpocketed or somebody comes up and hits you or whatever the case may be. Again, it's the idea that when you're going to these Fiesta events, you need to understand what you're going into. You're going into a very crowded place. And by and large, we have this conversation. San Antonio, we have good people in the city. Our city is very laid back. People are here to have a good time and enjoy themselves. And so you just have to be aware of those few people.
There are going to be some criminals down there.
There are. There are going to be people who are not reasonable. They are there with short tempers and nothing to lose, and they have they won't hesitate to ruin your day.
And they know that you've got money.
There you are.
To spend on the food vendors and the drink vendors. And so they're going to be trying to figure out a way to get it from you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Don't carry cash. They take your charge card to get the tickets at Niosa and St. Mary's now, so you don't have to have cash anymore. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good thing. What are some other ways to stay safe?
If I always advocate when people are going to Fiesta, try to go with, maybe a group of people, right? I mean, if you're with a group of people, one, not only are you a little less likely to be hit with just a random act because you have other people kind of looking out for you.
Right.
There's safety in numbers. And then if you're with a group, maybe if you are a little too intoxicated, somebody else from that group can drive you or arrange for the Uber or whatever it is. So if it's possible, try not to go alone or just you and your spouse. Try to go with a group.
Let me give you 1 minute to say something about BRIC criminal defense.
Sure. So 210-874-5080, BRIC Criminal Defense. All we do is we represent people who have been accused of crimes, and we use our knowledge to try to get them through that situation and put them back to go on with their normal lives.
Thank you guys for joining me today.
It's a pleasure.
I appreciate it, Todd. Thank you so much.
We've been talking about the hidden legal issue blind spots of Fiesta and criminal defense, staying out of trouble and staying safe. I'm Todd Marquardt. I'll talk to you later.